June 30th, 1908. A blast 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. But there was no bomb. No crater, no explanation. Until someone looked at what Tesla was doing that exact same night. Siberia. Tunguska River Valley. 7:17 m local time. A fireball streaked across the morning sky, brighter than the sun. Witnesses reported it looked like a pipe or cylinder of intense light, bluish-white, moving horizontally across the heavens. Then, the explosion. The shockwave flattened 80 million trees across 830 square miles. Reindeer herders 40 miles away were knocked off their feet. Windows shattered in villages 500 miles distant. Seismic stations across Europe and Asia registered the blast. In London, newspapers spontaneously ignited on shelves. But when scientists finally reached the remote location in 1927, 19 years later, they found something impossible. No crater. No meteorite fragments. No explanation. The trees at ground zero were still standing, stripped of branches but perfectly upright. Around them, millions of trees lay flattened in a radial pattern, all pointing away from the center, as if something had exploded in the air above them. But the truly shocking part was, someone had predicted it 3 weeks earlier. June 11th, 1908. New York City. Nikola Tesla stood in the offices of the New York Times, gesturing wildly with his hands as he always did when excited about an idea. "Gentlemen," he announced, "I am about to demonstrate something that will change warfare forever. Wireless transmission of power across any distance. I can illuminate the Arctic. I can destroy enemy fleets from 1,000 miles away. I can make the very air itself burn with electricity." The reporters scribbled notes but exchanged skeptical glances. Tesla had made grand claims before. The wizard of electricity was becoming known as much for his eccentricities as his genius. Tesla was 52 years old. His glory days seemed behind him. The war of currents, his battle against Edison, had been won. Alternating current powered the world now, but his greatest dream, the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, sat abandoned and deteriorating. J.P. Morgan had pulled funding 2 years earlier when he realized Tesla wanted to give away electricity for free. "Mr. Tesla," one reporter ventured, "if you can transmit power wirelessly, why do we still use wires?" Tesla's eyes flashed with anger and pain. "Because men like Morgan care more about profit than progress. But I will prove my system works. I will demonstrate it where no one can interfere." "Where?" the reporter asked. Tesla smiled mysteriously. "Somewhere remote. Somewhere without electrical infrastructure to complicate my measurements. I'm thinking the Arctic. Or perhaps Siberia." The reporters laughed. Tesla, offended, stormed out. But he wasn't joking. This is where everything changed. Tesla returned to his laboratory at 46 East Houston Street. The equipment he'd salvaged from Wardenclyffe filled the space. Massive Tesla coils, capacitor banks, oscillators capable of generating millions of volts. His assistant, George Scherf, was waiting. "Mr. Tesla, I've calculated the parameters you requested. To reach Siberia from New York, we'd need to generate a standing wave through the Earth itself, using the planet's natural resonance frequency. 7.83 hertz, Tesla said quietly. The heartbeat of the world. Tesla had discovered this frequency years earlier in Colorado Springs. The Earth, he'd learned, was like a gigantic bell that could be rung if you hit it at exactly the right frequency. And once ringing, that energy could be tapped anywhere on the planet. But there was a problem. To generate enough power to create a visible demonstration thousands of miles away, he'd need to channel enormous amounts of energy through the Earth's crust. And if his calculations were even slightly off— "Sir," Scherf said nervously, "the energy levels you're proposing, they could be dangerous." "Dangerous? Of course they're dangerous. All great discoveries are dangerous. Do you think lightning isn't dangerous? Yet I've tamed it. I've made it dance to my command." Tesla walked to his window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Robert Peary is leading an expedition to the North Pole. He departed in July of last year. By now he should be in the high Arctic. I've sent him a message, A coded telegram, telling him to watch the northern sky on the night of June 30th. You told him what to expect? Scherf asked. I told him he would see proof that the age of wireless power has begun. I told him the sky itself would become luminous, as bright as day, powered by energy I transmit from New York through the very earth beneath his feet. Tesla pulled out a map, spreading it across his workbench. He'd marked New York with a red pin and the North Pole with a blue one. But there was something odd about the line he'd drawn between them. The Great Circle Route, Tesla explained, from New York to the North Pole, passes through here. His finger rested on a remote region of Siberia, the Tunguska River Valley. The energy will be focused along this path. The standing wave will build in amplitude as it travels through the Earth's crust. At the antipode, the opposite side of the world from our transmission point, the energy will be minimal. But along the path, Tesla paused. There may be some atmospheric effects. What kind of effects? Scherf asked. Tesla didn't answer. He was already preparing the equipment. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. June 30th, 1908, 11:17 p.m. New York time, m:17 a.m. in Siberia. Tesla threw the switch. The laboratory erupted with electrical fury. Purple lightning arcs danced between the Tesla coils, creating a deafening, crackling roar. The smell of ozone filled the air. The wooden floor vibrated beneath their feet. Power output? Tesla shouted over the noise. Scherf checked the meters. 100 million volts. Sir, this is more than we've ever... More. I need more. Tesla adjusted the frequency, fine-tuning the oscillation to match Earth's natural resonance. The building itself began to shake. In apartments above and below, residents were jolted awake by the vibrations. The meters climbed higher. 200 million volts. 300 million, sir? The capacitors are overheating. Maintain the frequency. 30 seconds more! Through the laboratory windows, Tesla could see something extraordinary. The air outside was beginning to glow. A faint blue-green luminescence like the aurora borealis. But in New York City, people were coming to their windows, pointing at the sky. And then, after exactly 30 seconds, Tesla pulled the switch. The apparatus powered down. The lightning stopped. The vibration ceased. In the sudden silence, Tesla and Scherf looked at each other. Did it work? Scherf whispered. We won't know for weeks, Tesla replied. It takes time for ships to return from the Arctic. But if I'm right, Peary saw something no human has ever seen. The very sky ignited by wireless electricity, transmitted halfway around the world. Tesla smiled, but it wasn't his usual confident smile. It was uncertain. Almost worried. Let's hope, he said quietly, that we didn't send too much power. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. 8,000 miles away, in the Siberian wilderness, Evenki reindeer herders were beginning their day. Semyon Semenov was tending his reindeer when he noticed something strange. The animals were agitated, stamping their feet, making distressed sounds. Birds that had been singing moments before suddenly fell silent. Then he saw it, a column of light, bluish-white, moving across the northern sky. Not falling, but traveling horizontally, like a train of fire. What is that? His brother asked, pointing. Before Semyon could answer, the light intensified. It became so bright he couldn't look directly at it. The heat was intense, like standing too close to a furnace, and then the sky exploded. The blast wave hit like a solid wall. Semyon was thrown backward, landing hard on the ground. His shirt felt like it was on fire. Trees around him swayed violently, some snapping like matchsticks. But the reindeer, hundreds of them, were killed instantly. Their bodies charred, smoking. Semyon scrambled to his feet and ran. Behind him, he could hear an enormous roaring sound, like 1,000 waterfalls, like the earth itself was screaming. When he finally stopped running, miles away he looked back. The entire horizon was glowing. Smoke rose in a massive column, reaching into the clouds. The forest was gone. What have we done? He whispered, but Semyon Semenov had it backward. The question wasn't what had they done. The question was, what had someone else done to them? This is the moment that changed everything. July 2nd, 1908. 2 days after the explosion, the Irkutsk Magnetic and Meteorological Observatory, 550 miles south of Tunguska, recorded unusual readings. Seismograph needles had gone crazy on June 30th, but more strangely, magnetic field readings showed massive disruption. Director A.V. Voznesensky noted in his log, "Magnetic disturbance consistent with severe geomagnetic storm, but no solar activity reported. Source unknown. Even stranger, observatories across Europe reported similar magnetic disruptions at exactly the same time. And something else, atmospheric pressure waves had rippled across the entire planet. Barographs in London, Washington, and Jakarta all registered the same anomalous pressure spike. But the strangest reports came from Western Europe. On the night of June 30th, and for several nights after, the sky across Europe glowed. People could read newspapers at midnight without artificial light. In London, the Royal Observatory reported luminous clouds and an unusual afterglow persisting until dawn. One scientist wrote, "The night sky was so bright that I photographed the clouds at midnight using no flash. This wasn't normal. Even the brightest meteors don't cause global atmospheric luminescence, unless the energy didn't come from a meteor at all. You won't believe this, but..." July 8, 1908. 8 days after the explosion. Robert Peary sat in his ship, the Roosevelt, trapped in Arctic ice near Ellesmere Island. He was frustrated. The North Pole remained tantalizingly out of reach. His previous attempt in 1906 had failed. This expedition wasn't going much better, but something strange had happened on June 30th. Peary wrote in his diary, "Peculiar lights in sky. Northern horizon glowed with unusual intensity. Multiple colors, blue, green, white. Effect lasted approximately 20 minutes, beginning shortly after local midnight. Unlike typical aurora, more focused, more intense. Crew disturbed by phenomenon." He remembered the telegram he'd received before leaving New York, from Tesla. Something about watching the sky, about a demonstration of wireless power. At the time, he'd dismissed it as the eccentric inventor's usual grandiosity. But now, Peary pulled out the telegram and read it again. Tesla had specified the date, June 30th. He'd specified the time, midnight, your local time. Peary did a quick calculation. Midnight in his location corresponded to approximately 7:15 a.m. in Siberia. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic cold. Could Tesla have actually done it? But Peary had no way to know what had happened in Siberia. No communication. No reports. The Tunguska region was one of the most remote places on Earth. It would be 19 years before scientists reached the blast site. By then, Tesla's involvement would be almost completely forgotten. Almost. When the door opened, what they saw. 13 years after Tunguska, Leonid Kulik, a Russian mineralogist, became obsessed with reports of a massive meteorite impact in Siberia. He'd read eyewitness accounts of the 1908 event. He'd studied the seismographic data. He was convinced a large iron meteorite had struck the Tunguska region, and that recovering it would be the scientific discovery of the century. He organized an expedition. The journey took weeks. Traveling through Siberian wilderness with reindeer and sleds, Kulik and his team finally reached the region in 1927. What they found defied explanation. "There's no crater," his assistant said, looking around in confusion. They stood in a clearing surrounded by dead trees. But these trees weren't blown over. They were standing upright, stripped of branches, looking like telephone poles. "The epicenter should be here," Kulik said, checking his maps. "All the fallen trees point away from this spot. But there's nothing. No impact crater. No meteorite. They searched for days. The devastation extended in all directions. 80 million trees flattened in a perfect radial pattern. But at the center, nothing." Kulik collected samples. Soil analysis showed no traces of meteor material, no nickel iron fragments, no cosmic dust. "It's as if," one team member said, "something exploded in the air above us." But what? Kulik had no answer. He would return 5 more times over the next decade, always hoping to solve the mystery. He never did. But there was one detail he recorded that bothered him for the rest of his life. The pattern of destruction wasn't quite symmetrical. It was slightly elongated, stretched along a line running northwest to southeast, exactly along the Great Circle route from New York to the North Pole. But here's what they didn't know. Tesla never spoke publicly about Tunguska. Not once, but those close to him noticed something strange. In July 1908, immediately after the Siberian explosion, Tesla abruptly shut down his research into long-distance wireless power transmission. His assistant, George Scherf, noticed Tesla burning notebooks, an act completely out of character for the meticulous inventor who saved every scrap of paper. "Sir, those calculations took months to develop," Scherf protested. Tesla didn't respond. He just kept feeding pages into the fire, watching them turn to ash. When Scherf asked what was wrong, Tesla finally spoke. "Some forces are too powerful to control. Some experiments should never be repeated. But the Peary demonstration, there will be no demonstration," Tesla snapped. "We will not discuss this further." In the weeks that followed, Tesla seemed haunted. He barely slept. He barely ate. He spent hours staring out his window at the New York skyline, as if calculating distances, angles, power levels. A colleague asked him once, "Nikola, did you hear about that meteor strike in Siberia? Apparently it flattened an entire forest." Tesla's face went pale. "A meteor," he said flatly. "Yes, of course. A meteor." But his hands were shaking. The evidence that was buried. 7 years after Tunguska, Tesla's laboratory at Wardenclyffe Tower was finally demolished. The tower itself was torn down for scrap metal to pay his debts. Everything inside was catalogued, boxed, stored. Among the materials seized was a leather-bound notebook labeled Wireless Power Transmission, Test Series June 1908. The notebook contained detailed calculations for transmitting power through the Earth's crust using resonance frequency amplification. Tesla had mapped out potential target locations: the North Pole, South Pole, remote Pacific Islands, and notably, central Siberia. Next to the Siberian coordinates, Tesla had written, "Potential unintended energy release along transmission path. Recalculate amplitude limits." And beneath that, in different ink, apparently added later, "Danger. Atmospheric ionization threshold exceeded. Do not repeat." The notebook was classified by military authorities who were studying Tesla's work. It was locked away in a vault at the Office of Naval Research. It remained classified for over 80 years. When it was finally released in 1996, most people didn't understand its significance. By then, the Tunguska explosion had been thoroughly studied, and the scientific consensus was clear. It was caused by an asteroid or comet airburst, case closed. But a few researchers looked more carefully at Tesla's notes. They noticed something the official investigations had missed. The timing was too perfect. June 30, 1908. The Tunguska explosion occurred at 7:17 a.m. local time. That corresponds to 11:17 p.m. on June 29th in New York, and according to Tesla's laboratory logs, which survived because they were kept separately, he ran a high-power transmission test at exactly 11:17 p.m. on June 29th, 1908. The test lasted for 30 seconds. The explosion in Tunguska began at 7:17 a.m. and lasted approximately 30 seconds. Coincidence? Maybe, but there's more. Tesla was interviewed by a reporter about his wireless power system. The reporter asked, "Mr. Tesla, if your system works, why haven't you demonstrated it?" Tesla looked tired. He was 81 years old, living in a hotel, subsisting on credit and the goodwill of friends. "I did demonstrate it once," he said quietly, "long ago. But the results were unexpected. I realized that some technologies are too dangerous to pursue." "What happened?" the reporter asked. Tesla smiled sadly. Let's just say I learned that transmitting large amounts of power through the Earth's crust requires more precision than I possessed. The margin for error is very small, and the consequences of error are very large. Can you be more specific? No, Tesla said firmly. I cannot. And I will not. The reporter tried to press him, but Tesla refused to say more. The interview ended. That passage was cut from the published article. The editor thought it made Tesla sound senile, but the reporter kept his notes. Years later, after Tesla's death, he reread them and wondered, what had Tesla actually done? Then came the breakthrough. Dr. Andrei Olkovatov, a Russian physicist, published a paper comparing electromagnetic anomalies recorded during the Tunguska event with known effects of high-power electrical discharges. He found matches, the magnetic disturbances, the atmospheric luminescence, the lack of meteor fragments, the standing trees at ground zero, the elongated blast pattern, all consistent with a massive electrical discharge, not a meteor impact. Olkovatov proposed a theory. What if Tunguska was caused by some kind of natural electrical phenomenon? A massive discharge from the ionosphere to the Earth's surface? But other scientists asked, what could trigger such a discharge? One researcher, Dr. Peter Laviolette, suggested an alternative. What if it wasn't natural? What if someone created it deliberately? He'd been studying Tesla's work. He'd read the declassified notebooks, and he'd noticed the date coincidence. Laviolette calculated the energy required to create the Tunguska blast, approximately 15 megatons of TNT equivalent. Then he calculated the theoretical output of Tesla's wireless power system. Based on the specifications in the 1908 notebook, the numbers matched. Tesla could have done it, Laviolette wrote. His system, operating at maximum power with the resonance effect of the Earth's crust amplifying the transmission, could have released enough energy to cause Tunguska. It wasn't a weapon. It was an accident. An experiment that went horribly, catastrophically wrong. The scientific community rejected Laviolette's theory. Speculation, they said. No proof, but they couldn't explain away the coincidences. The date, the time, the electromagnetic anomalies, Tesla's sudden abandonment of wireless power research, his destroyed notebooks, his cryptic comments years later, and then, in 2013, something changed everything. A research team from the Smithsonian Institution conducted a detailed survey of the Tunguska site using modern ground-penetrating radar. They found something previous expeditions had missed. Deep beneath the epicenter, approximately 200 meters down, the rock showed signs of having been subjected to intense electromagnetic fields. The magnetic orientation of iron particles in the stone had been scrambled, as if by a powerful magnetic pulse. This isn't consistent with meteor impact, the lead researcher said. Meteors don't generate magnetic pulses of this strength. But you know what does? Extremely high-voltage electrical discharges. They also found something else. Trace elements in the soil that suggested the presence of vaporized copper and other metals consistent with electrical equipment. As if something had exploded or been vaporized at ground zero. But there shouldn't be any metal at the site. The Tunguska region was pristine wilderness in 1908. No mines. No industrial activity, nothing that would explain the presence of these materials, unless something was there on June 30th, 1908, something that was destroyed in the blast, the theory that explains everything. Here's what may have actually happened. Tesla wasn't trying to create an explosion. He was trying to prove his wireless power system by illuminating the Arctic sky for Robert Peary's expedition. His plan was to generate a standing wave through the Earth's crust, using the planet's natural resonance frequency. The energy would travel underground, emerging at the North Pole as a visible atmospheric discharge, an artificial aurora. But Tesla made a critical error in his calculations. He underestimated the amplitude amplification effect. As the standing wave traveled through the Earth, it didn't just maintain its strength, it increased. The resonance effect magnified the power exponentially. When the energy reached the Siberian region, directly along the transmission path to the North Pole, it was far more powerful than Tesla had anticipated. the energy punched through the Earth's surface, creating a massive electromagnetic discharge into the atmosphere. This ionized the air, creating a fireball. The ionized air then collapsed explosively, creating the blast wave that flattened 80 million trees. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a comet. It was an accident. Tesla's wireless power transmission system worked exactly as he predicted. It just worked too well, and when Tesla realized what he'd done, that his harmless demonstration had potentially killed people and devastated an enormous area, he was horrified. He shut down the research, destroyed his notes, refused to ever speak about it, because Nikola Tesla, the man who wanted to give free energy to the world, had instead created an accidental weapon of mass destruction. But wait, there's one more piece. The 100th anniversary of the Tunguska event, a Russian documentary crew obtained access to previously sealed Soviet archives. They found something remarkable. A report from 1959, in which Soviet scientists had investigated the possibility that Tunguska was caused by a directed energy weapon test. The Soviets had considered the Tesla theory. They'd studied his papers. They'd interviewed people who knew him. Their conclusion, stamped secret and never published. The Tunguska event exhibits characteristics consistent with the theoretical effects of Tesla's wireless power transmission system. While definitive proof is lacking, the circumstantial evidence is compelling. Recommendation: continue research into electromagnetic weapons based on Tesla's principles. In other words, even during the Cold War, Soviet scientists believed Tesla might have caused Tunguska, and they wanted to recreate it. Whether they succeeded remains classified. So what really happened on June 30, 1908? We may never know for certain. The direct evidence, Tesla's complete notebooks, eyewitness testimony from his laboratory, physical artifacts from the Tunguska site, is gone, destroyed, or lost. But we have Tesla's documented work on wireless power transmission, his laboratory logs showing a test on the exact date and time, his immediate abandonment of the research. Afterward, his cryptic admissions years later, the electromagnetic anomalies at Tunguska, the unusual blast characteristics, the trajectory alignment with his transmission path, the lack of meteor fragments, the underground magnetic disruption, the trace metals in the soil, all circumstantial. None definitive, but together they paint a picture of a genius who reached too far, who tried to change the world with a single demonstration, and who accidentally unleashed forces he couldn't control. Tesla died in 1943, taking the complete truth with him. But on his last night alive, according to the hotel maid, he was found sitting at his desk with papers scattered around him, papers covered with calculations, frequency equations, power amplitudes, resonance curves, and at the bottom of one page, written in shaky handwriting, Tunguska. I'm sorry, the maid couldn't make sense of it. She threw the papers away, only years later. Would anyone realize what they meant? Nikola Tesla, the man who lit the world, may have also created one of the most powerful explosions in human history. Accident. And he carried the guilt for the rest of his life, the end. Or is it? Because if Tesla could do it in 1908 with primitive equipment, what could modern technology do with his principles? And has anyone already tried? Think about that the next time you hear about an unexplained explosion in a remote part of the world. Maybe it's not so unexplained after all.